well, sorry for the delay. I hope you guys are still there.
Yes, we're still here.
Good. Yeah. So, like I said, you're actually researching our entanglement with technology. That's what I read on Petra's website, where a lot of your joint work is featured. That sounded like really interesting. Petra, let's maybe start with you. You probably didn't wake up one day and said like, let's investigate our entanglement with technology by making arts with robots. So can you say a couple of things about your inspiration? You know, like how did you actually get into that area of topic?
Okay. Hi, Peter. First of all, thanks for inviting us. And I often describe myself as an artistic researcher, really trying to spending all my academic career melding the artistic and research. And as part of artistic research, aesthetics really plays a central role. But I don't understand aesthetics as a question of beauty or even confined to the visual sense. I understand aesthetics as a means of embodied meaning making, actually. And so all my practice was involved in that. And before I worked with robots, I worked a lot with virtual reality technologies. In particular, I did my graduate studies in the lab in Chicago where they invented the cave, which was inspired by the Enterprise's holodeck. It's just that you couldn't touch anything there really, but you were embedded or immersed in a virtual space. And I was always interested in actually the non-human agencies of these human, non-human ecologies that we are creating with technology. And in virtual reality, while we are, or at least in the cave where we are embodied, where we interact with these virtual entities in embodied ways, they were still always virtual and reliant on, suspending our disbelief, as they talked about it in virtual reality. So I was really interested in working with non-human agencies in a shared physical space where we can actually share the space with them and bodily empathize and interact with them. And this is where robots for me are the perfect candidates. They are, for me, non-human creatures, human-made, but non-human social entities. And our practice is really focusing on exploring possible relationships we can have with these non-human social creatures.
Yeah, well, that sounds very interesting, and indeed, so you're approaching it from a social point of view. It's not about the bot; it's about us and the bot, and how do we reflect on the bot. Maybe a good way to make this a little bit tangible is to look at a couple of your joint work. We'll start actually with a work that's called Accomplice. And the first time I saw it, I thought like, hey, this is a very interesting work. That's actually how I got to know you. So and I'll explain a little bit, just a little bit about the work, and then we're going to roll a quick video. So, but let's imagine, dear audience, that you walk into a museum room, your typical pristine, modernistic, empty museum room, and you walk in there. And then you go like, hey, there's nothing here. Where's the artwork? But turns out you're not alone, because there's a colony of little creatures living in between the walls, and they're trying to interface with you, but they can't because the wall is in between. So let's roll a quick video here of the work. All right. So I hope that gave you the audience. I'm chatting here with Petra and Rob. They're just seeing me, so they're not watching the live stream. But I hope that gave you a little bit of an impression of the work. It's really interesting. So Petra, maybe first you can tell us a little bit more about the concept of this work. I mean, personally, for me, I really had this strong kind of impression of curiosity, not just a bunch of evil bots hiding, but maybe there were also friendly bots, but it's just a personal impression, and there's probably a range of things that inspired you to make this. So maybe you can say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I mean, curiosity was certainly a big component of the work, but I asked Rob to talk about that later because that's his area of speciality. To me, Accomplice is really an installation that serves as a magnifying glass or a magnifying lens into our built environment and how we co-inhabit the world with intelligent agents that we don't know much about generally in our daily life. Accomplice is almost literally staging this world, embedding a troop of curious, busy, intelligent agents into the architectural skin, an architectural skin that we are familiar with, and rendering it strange. So these troop of curious agents, they just go about their own business in a way, and Rob will tell you a bit more what their own business is. But as they go about their own business, they have an impact on our reality and our world. They're transforming our lived environment and have a visceral physical impact on it. So that would be the short description.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Yeah.
So and then like I said, everyone has a different experience with this work. For me, it was curiosity, but it might be different things for different people. In a way, also, I think maybe in an artistic approach, you could have almost like an outside-in perspective, like how can we build artworks that people tend to project, a meaning on, like you said in the beginning, emotions, attentions, etc. And the other approach, of course, is are we using AI to actually drive the artwork? But maybe from that outside-in perspective, you already hinted at it, Rob, maybe you can say something, not so much, like what kind of AI is inside, but more, what are the different things that people project on this work, and what were maybe the nudges that you used in this work to kind of to evoke those, to evoke that projection, if you wish.
It is that feedback loop with curiosity as well, I think.
I guess the strongest thing that people, if we watch the people watching the robots, the strongest thing is the sense in which they're somehow visiting the robot's environment, the almost a zoo-like feeling that they're coming and they're sharing this environment with them. They're sharing the wall is the boundary, but they're there on the sort of robot's terms. For us, then the tension is between building the robots that are actually doing something. So let's say they're learning, or we're trying to model curiosity or whatever, and performing that curiosity so that it's recognizable from the outside, so that people who come to the artwork can actually see them going about their business and interpret their movements, and when they are actually engaging with the audience, when they're looking through the holes that they've made.
Mm. Yeah. And I would perhaps also like to, there's also this soundscape that has become really important. So we've programmed them. At first, I think it was a kind of a, what is it called, just for testing purposes and so forth. So they use the chisel also as a signaling to each other. And so they're collaborating with each other as they're exploring the world, and they're changing it together. They're collaborating on sculpting the work, and that becomes, as the soundscape is often the first thing that audiences experience, and it's also the thing based on which they follow. So they follow the robots along the wall and then peek in from the outside. There's a bit of a they have to peek in, and often we had to tell them also that they must not reach through the wall with their phones, because that is often the first response, that people think they can get a better look at the robots with their phones, but of course the robots don't know about phones and hands and so forth. So.
That's funny. Yeah, and so they're having interactions with each other. They're having interactions with the humans, and it's not just random behavior, but this way you evoke these different emotional responses within the human. Okay, that's really interesting. I also heard, at some point you exhibited this in Bilbao. You built like a huge wall. There's also this time element to it. I think it started with a very nice white wall, and which was spotless clean, and 3 months later it was completely destroyed. So
yes,
that was cool. Hey, now. Obviously, I think people might be curious on what's happening behind these walls, but I would actually, and you made a previous work which is called Zwischenräume, where people can take a sneak peek. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over Zwischenräume, and I'm going to straight to another project of yours called Machine Movement Lab. To the audience, Petra's and Rob's websites are on our website for the event. So by all means, I would check in there and check out the Zwischenräume project if you're curious about what is behind this wall. Let's talk about Machine Movement Lab. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to give a very short description, and then we're first going to watch a video. But basically, you wanted to send a robot to dance school. So to interpret, that's my interpretation, to interpret the modern dance that dancers would perform and turn it in its own choreography. So let's roll a little video so that the audience can experience that work.
The consciousness of my body and consciousness of the parts, because I think it's a back and forth. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Okay, that was great. Interesting to see this movie. Like I said, we wanted to send a robot to dance school and then see what kind of language, what kind of personal interpretation of dance the robot could actually perform. Again, let's do maybe a little bit the same thing, if you don't mind. So I'll start with Petra. talk a little bit more about your motivation actually to do this work. I think it's probably both experiential, but also researchy in a way, right? So I think it's interesting to discuss that a bit. And then we'll switch again to Rob to see his thoughts as well. And Rob can maybe also comment a little bit to the AI inside. So not just projection of AI, but you also use some heavy duty AI inside here, some neural networks to let the robots learn. But Petra, maybe first from your perspective, what made you come to this work? What are you researching here?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so as you already mentioned, this Machine Movement Lab project has started a bit differently to accomplish, because it's more straightforward an artistic research project rather than, so the goal is not in the first instance to develop an experience that renders specific questions tangible to the audience, but to really use perhaps embodied experiences as a research methodology. And in later years, we are planning to make performances with performers and robot performers to involve audiences into these questions. But for the past 5 years, this project has very much focused on research and research methodology. And what Machine Movement Lab does is it takes the question of human, non-human encounters or human-machine relationships into the still young research fields of human-robot interaction and social robotics, and where these human-machine relationships are often explored with human-like or humanoid robots. You have the little now next to you, so that would be considered a humanoid robot, that has limbs and a head, and you often a human recorded voice, or at least uses human language to communicate. And we really were interested in approaching this question of human-machine relationships from a different starting point, and looking at how human-machine relationships can perhaps evolve on a more horizontal level. And by horizontal, I mean to really look at, so to not model human-machine relationships after human-human relationships, but to look at what is possible with abstract machinic entities. How can we develop relationships with them? How can we negotiate meaning with them? And we have early on identified movement, and particularly movement qualities. So the way how we use weight, the way how we use amplitude, and energy to express ourselves for meaning making between very, very different embodiments, or morphologies. And we have developed a methodology that we call performative body mapping, where we harness the expertise of contemporary dancers and choreographers to socially situate the robot, this very non-human-like machine, in ways that it can learn about human movement qualities that we can read. But it doesn't perform these human movement qualities as a human, but grounded it in its own machinic anatomy and perceptual world. So Rob can perhaps talk about this later.
So it's learning from the humans, but it's putting its own special sauce on top of it. So yes. That's interesting. But that makes me immediately curious. That's maybe a question for Rob, really.
Yeah.
Also, how do they learn? Because I have this sneaky suspicion there's a little bit of AI inside here, to let these robots learn from the humans.
Yeah. So we're particularly interested in this project in trying to combine learning from two different directions. So there's learning from the bottom up, the robot learning how to move based on its own embodiment, so that it's unique. It can move in unique ways, and we want it to take full advantage of its movement capabilities. Those were actually designed based on studies of the dancers moving as well. So the whole design of the robot was based around working with dancers, choreographers, to actually design the morphology of the robot. But then we want to start the robot again learning from that morphology what its movement capabilities are. And then from the other end, we have, as you could see in the video, performers working in costumes that mimic the robot. This helps us to implement or get over some of the problems with demonstration learning. So we're asking the dancers to demonstrate certain movements. We can then use supervised learning to learn to generalize those movements, but then we're using the grounded movement capabilities of the robot to interpret and improvise on top of those movements that have been provided by the dancer. So it can take it in ways that the dancers couldn't, based on its previously learned understanding, or this is a little bit strong, but previously learned control systems for its own embodiment. So it can do things that maybe the dancers couldn't do, but we can do it based upon the biases and constraints that have been learned through the recordings.
Okay, well, that's yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, the costume serves also, it serves for the dancer to get a better understanding of the machine embodiment. So we don't ask dancers to demonstrate human dancing, but we ask them to step into the robotic embodiment and to engage with the world from within this robotic embodiment. And this is how they develop their. So it's a bit of an intermeshing of human movement qualities and robotic embodiment. And this is where our movement recordings start, and that then gets further transformed into machine learning, as Robert said.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think you're also using constraints. The best artists give themselves constraints. Let me just make a painting with just brown paint, for example. So you use the constraint here of the box to let ultimately let the dancers imagine the world of the robots, and vice versa. Well, this is fascinating work. There's so much more I would love to ask you, but time is up. So I'm going to jump into both your websites. I'm going to look into all these wonderful art projects, and also Rob, on your website I did take a sneak peek, so I see a lot of interesting work around computational creativity as well. So I'm definitely going to jump in deeper, and we should repeat this event and talk for 5 hours maybe. So thank you very much.
Anytime.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much.